Hi everybody, I'm Dave Shapcott, and this is another video about Vietnam by me, and this one is about why I like living in Vietnam now that Vietnam is truly run by the Vietnamese themselves and not a colony or neo-colony of some foreign power. And when I go over to Vietnam, especially when I go into the villages, and I'm the only foreigner, say, in that village, then I feel like I'm experiencing Vietnamese culture in as pure a form as it is possible to get when I'm present, because obviously when you've got a foreigner around it modifies things a little bit. But there's a lot of the practices of Vietnam that I really like and have adopted. So I regularly now go to a Buddhist temple and engage in Buddhist practices, and I also like the way that the Vietnamese honour their dead and the rituals around honouring their dead, and I've brought some of those practices into my life too. And I have learnt some Vietnamese, which is language which is quite difficult for a Westerner to learn. It's because it's a tonal language, so it's very difficult for us. But it's very rewarding to learn that, and it was really brought home to me just what a great thing it is for me to be able to speak to people who don't speak any English at all. When I was reading Graham Greene's great book, The Quiet American, at the end of the book he talks about going out onto the street, and there's the familiar group of old ladies sitting on a street corner, and he says, I have no idea what they see, what they're talking about, what their worldview is, and I will never know. Well, one day when I was in Vietnam, 2004, the old lady that I had got to know and I visited every day, she had been a Viet Minh fighter in the war against the French, and she said to me one day, right David, you are a trained English teacher. I have got a number of great-grandchildren in my family. Every Monday night from now on you will be teaching them English at Twee's place. I said, okay. So got the address. Monday night I dutifully went round, found the street. I'm walking up and down. I just can't find Twee's place. None of it makes any sense. Then some old ladies who were sitting on the street corner came over to me and said in Vietnamese, are you the foreigner that Ba Noi has got to teach the children at Twee's house? I said, yes, that's me, but I can't find Twee's house anywhere. They said, oh, we know where it is, come with us and we'll show you. And I thought, this is great. I'm able to talk to the old ladies on the street corner, and when I go out to the villages, I can talk to the old ladies and the old men out in the village. No, I'm not very good, but at least I can have some sort of a conversation, and I really enjoy that. And it is all part of the sort of enjoyment of being able to go to Vietnam now that it is a country run by the Vietnamese. I would hate it to have gone over there when the French or the Americans were running it. Hated to have. And I remember when the Americans got thrown out, our newspapers were all full of, oh, Saigon has fallen to the communists. The communists have taken over South Vietnam. Wah, wah, wah. And of course, the Americans had sold our media on this idea of a domino theory, whereby the communists would sweep down through South Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia, secure a base head there, and then monolithic communism would continue down take over South Korea, take over Thailand, Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand, and then spread out to the world. And so all these great predictions about, you know, the horror that was going to follow once South Vietnam was reunited with the North. And sure enough, just as the Americans had predicted, 4 years after they were thrown out, the Chinese did sweep over the border into Vietnam, not to join them to take over the world for communism, but to do what they had done many, many times in the last 2,500 years. They came to invade them, and of course they came up against an army that had beaten the Americans, and the Chinese army was no match for it and got thrown back into China. And what the Americans fudged over, as they insisted on this monolithic communist bloc, was that there are simmering tensions between the nations within the communist arena. So there are simmering tensions between Vietnam and China, and many Vietnamese even today tell me that they believe that China still views them as a rogue state of China, rogue province of China, and that the Chinese wish to take over Vietnam and bring it back to within what they see their rightful domain. And so there's these simmering tensions that go on. It's not just because they're both communist countries that you know, they're bosom buddies, not by long shots. Now, when the Americans took over Vietnam after the French got tossed out, Americans took over as from 1954. They looked around for somebody to run the show, and they brought in a Catholic guy. This is into a country where there's a very small percentage of people who are Catholics. It was a Buddhist, you know, 80–90% of people were Buddhists at this time. And he set up a brutal dictatorship. Now, one of his brothers got the secret police going, and they rounded up everybody who disagreed with them and put them into torture chambers. And many of these people who disagreed with them were people who hoped that once the French left, that a liberal multi-party democracy could be established in South Vietnam. And another one of his brothers was the Archbishop of Hue for the Catholics. And the Pope had said to him, look, if you want to ever become a cardinal, you have to have a big percentage of your population are Catholic. So this fellow started rounding up Buddhist monks and nuns and executing them, and telling their congregations, if you don't convert to Catholicism, this is what's going to happen to you. Now, that really alienates people when you behave like that. So many of the opposition moved west and set up the National Liberation Front. Now, most of these people were folk who wanted liberal multi-party democracies. There's only a few of them are communists, and one of the communists, Lê Swan, headed up north and said to the Politburo in Hanoi, look, the reality is most of the NLF want a capitalist multi-party democracy. If we don't get there, down there, and help the NLF and effectively take it over, there isn't going to be a communist government down in South Vietnam. And that is how the North Vietnamese army came to get involved. Now, a Buddhist monk, South Vietnamese monk, outlined to the Americans how they had the best opportunity to secure South Vietnam as a communist, as a capitalist-based economy and a multi-party democracy. he said, look, if you get a big meeting going of all of the educated South Vietnamese who want this multi-party democracy, and you get them to set up a government whose task will be to establish a constitution, and that you can anticipate that the representatives of the rural communities who come into this government will be saying, right, we want land reform, we want the rich landlords tossed out, and we want the land given to the people who are actually working in the fields. And for a very small percentage of the money they squandered on the war, the Americans could have secured that. Then the villagers would also be wanting health clinics set up around the villages with well-trained people and the latest equipment. The Americans could have easily paid for that. And then they would also want schools for their children and university for their children, because the French had made sure there was almost nothing going on in the way of education. And they would want a Vietnamese-based education system, not one that lionised Western culture, but a Vietnamese one. That could have been done. And then they could have got a big meeting going with all the entrepreneurs, and there's plenty of those in South Vietnam, looking at setting up industry, setting up businesses, low interest rate loans to get those established. Then you start having a very high percentage of the population are employed, and with businesses and industry going, the standard of living starts to rise. Now, by the time that 2 years was up, where the Geneva Convention that had met after the French got tossed out and had got everybody to sign up that, yes, after 2 years we will have free elections. Well, after 2 years of the reality of that the Americans had imposed on the Vietnamese people, the information coming into General Westmoreland, General Eisenhower, the American president, was that 80% of the South Vietnamese people would have voted for Ho Chi Minh because they hated the brutal dictator that was backed by the Americans. And the Ho Chi Minh might have been a communist, but he was a nationalist, and he was Vietnamese, and he wasn't beholden to any foreign power, and they admired him, and he had thrown the French out. They admired him immensely. Now, after 2 years of Thich Nhat Hanh's plan being enacted, the people still might have voted for Ho Chi Minh, but there was a much higher likelihood that they would have gone with maintaining a multi-party democracy with a capitalist base. But the Americans weren't interested in such a simple plan as that, and so they got tossed out. And when they got tossed out, I cheered. I was really pleased, and I vowed that when I could go over to Vietnam, I would start going over there and going over on a regular basis, which I do. So I have a very nice life, and I'm very, very thankful for it and very grateful that I'm able to live like this. I spend 9 months of the year living in New Zealand and 3 months living in Vietnam. It's a really nice life. Now, people often say to me, but Dave, it's a communist country. There's a very, very heavy police presence in communist countries. How can you live with that? Well, I say, well, there's good things and not so good things about having a heavy police presence, and good things and not so good things with having the very light police presence that we have in New Zealand. So, for instance, when the white supremacist killed 51 Muslims in March of 2019, my Vietnamese friends wrote to me. They were perplexed. How is it possible for somebody to get a large cache of arms all set up, to get a whole lot of bombs and explosives all set up, and the police don't know? Because over in Vietnam, The police can enter your home anytime they like or send in their representatives, and they search for guns, explosives and illegal drugs. So you just cannot hide these things from the police for very long. They will find out if you've got guns and explosives in your house pretty soon, and it's very hard to hold on to large amounts of illegal drugs for very long too. Although there are illegal drugs, of course, throughout the whole country, like there are in every country, but not guns and not explosives, no. And when I tell them about life in New Zealand, they are perplexed. They say, "You mean you have gangsters wandering around with big gang patches on their backs, and they build fortified gang headquarters with barbed wire all around the top of it, razor wire all around the top, and inside they have large caches of arms, explosives and illegal drugs, and often have illegal drug laboratories producing stuff in there, and that the gangs produce and supply all the illegal drugs in New Zealand, and you know exactly where they all are, and the police are doing nothing about this." I said, "Well, you know, we got a light police presence here." They said, "Well, if that was Vietnam, the police would simply just go to the gang headquarters, smash it down and burn it down, get all the gangsters with their gang patches and beat the living hell out of them and throw them into jail for long periods of time. You simply cannot have that in Vietnam." And I said, "Well, you know, these gang members, gangsters wander around with these gang patches on, and if you look at them in any way they don't like, they'll come over and beat you up." Well, that never happens in Vietnam. I'm sure there are gangsters there, but I never see them, and they're not obvious to me, and they're not out looking to beat people up at random as they do in New Zealand, just for the fun of it. And when I'm in Vietnam, I walk the streets at night. So I walk about 5 kilometres last year from my hotel down to the Opera House and afterwards back again late at night. I wouldn't walk 5 kilometres on a regular basis through the streets of Auckland City here of an evening. That'd be suicide. Invariably, after some time of doing that, some group of youths would spot this old boy wandering around those streets, know he was an easy target to beat up, and attack me. Wouldn't happen in Vietnam. So it's really, really nice being there and feeling that safe without, you know, terrorists and gangsters threatening me. And when I was watching TV with the old lady, Ba Noi, one night, we watched a drug raid on TV, and the police rush into this house, smash everybody up, grab the evidence, off they go to court. The gangsters are sitting in front of the court like this. 2 policemen on either side. Policemen push their head down. I said, "Oh, I've been into courts in New Zealand where I've seen criminals going like this at the police, at the judge, and then swearing at him." And she's amazed. She said, "Well, how could that be? Why didn't the police immediately just beat them up?" And apparently the police in Vietnam would do just that. But we have a lighter police presence, and so as a result of that, we also have the disadvantage of having huge disrespect for authority here, gangsters wandering around intimidating the citizens, and illegal drug manufacturing going on our soil. Illegal drugs are in Vietnam, make no two ways about that, but they're brought in from the Golden Triangle and from North Burma, and you know, the army and the police will grab people bringing these things in, and they get executed for doing this. It's a, you know, they don't mess around over there, and I mean, I enjoy the fruits of that. I don't. The downside isn't very nice, but I enjoy the upside of living in a country like that, and I enjoy the upside of living in New Zealand when I'm here as well. And the other thing I like about going out to the villages is how remarkably similar it often is to being on a Maori marae in New Zealand. So I went to one village and a government official came out to talk to the villagers. So we're all sitting there in front of the meeting house, nice sunny day, and all of a sudden a woman jumps up and starts berating this government official and shouting at him. Well, she's speaking rapid Vietnamese, so I can't follow. The only Vietnamese I can follow is when people sit in front of me, look directly at me and speak very slowly. Then I get it. But it's rapid. No, I couldn't get it. So I had to ask my friends, what is she saying? So they explained very slowly to me that she is telling this government official that there is an old saying in Vietnam, the king's rules end at the bamboo gate of the village. And by that they mean that within the village is ruled by the village council. If the king wants to bring in new laws that he wants the village to adhere to, then you come in, you explain what you'd like to do, the village council discusses it and says, yes, that's fine by us, or no, it's not, you better go back to the government and have another think about this. So I thought, oh, yeah, that's what goes on in the maraes that I've been to, where the ladies will jump up and berate government officials, you know, come in here and tell us what to do. So, you know, great. And the other thing that was very much like Maori culture when I was down on the coastal villages, I noticed in their temples they'd have whale bones on display. Oh, why is this, I asked myself. Why no, I asked my friends. And they explained that the Vietnamese regard the whales as the gods of the sea, these huge creatures out who in the sea is their arena. And if one of them dies and chooses to their body to be washed up onto to your shores, then they are saying to you effectively, we are entrusting you to honour our remains. So the villagers are then expected to treat the whale carcass like they would the remains of one of their dead relatives. You dig them into the ground, you leave them there for a year, then you dig the bones up and you clean them, wash all the bones clean, and then, well, like a dead relative, you put that into a box and you put it into a permanent grave site, concreted over. With the whale bones, they go into a temple where, you know, they can be similarly revered, the gods of the sea who chose to honour us with their presence. I say, oh, it's like in New Zealand that Maori in New Zealand have always traditionally, when whales have been washed up, then the whales have given their carcass to the local tribe. But when the white people came, they said, no. We run the show here. These whale carcasses are for scientific research and we will take them. So this has been a big point of contention because Maori have said, look, when you white people came to New Zealand, you signed a treaty with us, and our understanding of the treaty is that the white people living in New Zealand at the time were whalers and sealers, really rough, tough guys who were creating mayhem. So we wanted the English to come over here, set up governments to control the white people living in New Zealand so that they wouldn't riot all over the top of us, and that it would be someone who was officially charged with keeping an eye on the behaviour of these people. And the English said, no. We signed a treaty which gives us full governance of New Zealand. We're running the show now. So it's always been a point of contention, and the issue with the whales is one of those points of contention. So yeah, Vietnam has got some similarities to New Zealand, especially in the villages, and some things that are very, very different from New Zealand. And I really enjoy living over there for 3 months a year. It's a great place to be. So please make comments below about what you thought of the video. Thank you for watching.